Witam! It's been some time since The Witcher Season 2 came out, hopefully not too long, and this time I wanted to talk to you about something that I personally enjoy. You might already know that or not, but Netflix's series The Witcher is based on a book series Wiedźmin written by a Polish writer Andrzej Sapkowski. Well, Polish you say? Well, yes, and that fact is actually pretty important. As you may know, The Witcher takes place in a fantasy world filled with monsters, and those monsters are what I am going to be talking about today. Andrzej Sapkowski has taken a lot of inspiration in beasts already existing in folk all around the world, including one of the most overlooked regions when it comes to mythology, Eastern Europe. As he is Polish, he brought back to life a lot of Slavic monsters that never made it to modern media, and those beasts are what I am going to be talking about today. So starting with season 2 of the show, let me tell you about the Slavic monsters we saw. A little side note, I'm not gonna be talking about the non-Slavic monsters, so if something is not in the video, it's either of a different origin or I could have just overlooked it. The first character from Slavic folk we see in the series is Leszy, also known as borowy, laskowiec, boruta, borowiec, gajowy, lasowy, leśnik, leśny dziad, dziad borowy, wilczy pasterz. Oh, and those are just the Polish names. He is a Slavic demon of the woods, the king of the wilderness and the animals living in it. He's also sometimes worshipped as a demon of the dead. Leshi can appear in many forms, but most often he's portrayed as a man with an unnaturally white face. Sometimes he's old, sometimes not. He might have leaves as hair, he might have horns. He can even change his height depending on the height of the trees. As he is connected to the forest, he can appear wearing a woodsman's uniform and carry a gun or a bat. But more importantly, he can appear as an animal, wolves, bears and owls being his favorites, as well as the wind. He likes to be surrounded by his animals, aka anything that lives in the woods, which he herds in a mythical depths of the forest that in Polish we call mateczniki. Borowy is a being generally neutral to humans, but as he is protector of the forest, he is not afraid to hurt anyone that hurts the plants or the animals. He could bring the travelers deep into the forest or help them leave it safely, instruct the wild animals to attack you or protect you from them. This was especially important to hunters and lumberjacks. They would sacrifice crops or household animals to Leszy to ask him to interfere in the forest. Sometimes Leszy is depicted in the company of another being that made its way to the new season of The Witcher, Baba Yaga. Now, just to clear things out, Baba Yaga isn't mentioned by name in the series, but the character of Volev Meir, aka the evil witch, is based on her. Baba Yaga is a very mysterious character from Slavic folk, even though she's probably the most well-known one. Most of us know her as an evil children-eating witch. She lives in a hut on a chicken leg, which gives her home the ability to travel through the forest. She is generally described as an old deformed woman, blind or partially blind, with a bone leg and sometimes a remarkably ugly nose. As companions she chooses cats, preferably black ones, ravens, owls or snakes. Basically today's classic witch. Maybe aside from the hat that seems kind of specific. The thing is, it wasn't always that way. It's very hard to tell who Baba Yaga was before she became a witch in folk tales, but it's pretty clear that she was a part of the pagan beliefs. Sadly, the Christianization process in Eastern Europe was very violent, and unlike many of other European belief systems, there is not much left of things connected to Slavic mythology. Scientists aren't really sure whether Baba Yaga is a demon or a matriarchal goddess. Old Slavic matriarchal goddesses often got thrown into the evil witch category by the church. I mean, pretty much any Slavic goddess I read about is somehow connected to witchcraft. But it is pretty clear that she is in some way connected with death and the forest. That's why sometimes she appears with Leshy. Baba Yaga is surrounded by death symbolisms, One of the most interesting being the hat. It is possible that the hat itself represented a grave, as some Slavic tribes used to place the ashes of the deceased in little hats on legs, or place them also into hats on top of hills. There are also theories that she is connected to the ritual initiation of the youth. In this case, eating children basically means that she officially ended the childhood period of a person's life. Even in folk tales, she's not always bad. There exist some tales when she actually helps the hero in the tale, but those stories are significantly less popular than the evil witch ones. In the series, Wolfmare uses a certain beast against the witchers, and those dinosaur-looking creatures are basilisks. To be fair, basilisks aren't specifically Slavic monsters. They appear all over Europe, but as they are the creatures that I was absolutely terrified of as a child, I will very selfishly tell you about them. There are two versions of how a basilisk is created. The first one being, a basilisk is hatched every 100 years from an egg laid by a rooster. Yes, a rooster, this is not an error in translation. And the second one being slightly more complicated. A basilisk is hatched from an egg laid by specifically a 7-year-old rooster, and the egg has to be hatched for a full 9 years by a toad or a snake. The appearance of this monster and its abilities varies from tale to tale. Basilisks always have some characteristic of a serpent, and are sometimes called the serpent kings. But as the beast comes from a rooster, it sometimes also has chicken-like features. The powers of the creature also depend on the region. In some stories it is extremely poisonous, sometimes even the smell could kill. In other tales the basilisk has more dragon-like abilities and can spit fire. But in Poland the most well-known basilisks, or Bazyliszek as we call them in Polish, is the basilisk from Warsaw. In the legends, the most terrifying weapon the monster possesses is its eyes. Just one look into its eyes would kill you on the spot, sometimes even turn you into stone. The Polish Bazyliszek had the body of a rooster, the eyes of a toad, dragon-like wings and the tail of a snake. But how to defeat such a powerful beast? Well, in the case of the basilisk that lived in one of the basements in Warsaw in the 16th century, your best bet is mirrors. In both versions of the legends I heard, the basilisk is killed by looking at its reflection. In one version, a brave young tailor defeats the monster with one mirror. In the other, a prisoner with a death sentence is sent to the basement in full armor made of mirrors, with a promise of being released if he kills the beast. Very different vibes. Okay, but what if you're dealing with a basilisk problem in a different part of the world? Well, the residents of Vilnius killed its basilisk by throwing rue, a plant believed to have a power to repel basilisk, into its lair. The monster also has its natural predator, a weasel. I don't know why, but I can tell you that, just to be a little extra, the weasel also carries a rue in its adorable little snout on its way to absolutely slaughter the basilisk. Pretty cute. There is one more motif in The Witcher Season 2 that appears in Slavic mythology. Well, actually it appears in many European cultures, but it's mostly known from Scandinavian and Germanic mythologies. And this motif is the wild hunt. A wild hunt is a chase through the sky of a group of supernatural beings, be it gods, demons, ghosts, or witches. It is accompanied with thunder, lightning, and different cataclysms. Seeing the wild hunt was thought to be an omen of some catastrophe such as war or plague, or at the best the death of the one who witnessed it. People encountering the hunt might also be abducted to the underworld. Considering that the wild hunt traveled through the sky and was accompanied by thunder, it is quite likely that the reason the motif is presented in different parts of Europe is its connection to storms. Many mythological motifs can be explained by nature, as religions were generally created to explain our existence and the world surrounding us. Sadly, when it comes to the Slavic specific myths about the hunt, there aren't really many that survived. It is known that the motif did exist in Slavic paganism, but sadly, that's it. I don't know about you, but I'm not really satisfied with the Beast of Season 2. I mean, only one strictly Slavic monster. But fear not. This is why I am going to also tell you as a bonus about the monster from Season 1. The first creature introduced to us in Season 1 was a Kikimora. Shishimora, which is her other name, is a female household demon. There are two different kinds of Kikimoras. The one that comes from the forest and usually lives in a house is married to the domovoi, another household spirit. The other one comes from the swamp and is married to Leszy. Also, when I was researching Leszy, a lot of demons were said to be his wife, including Baba Yaga, so I don't know how I feel about the this word of that information. Unlike the domovoi or domownik in Polish, Kikimora is considered a bad spirit. She looks like a tiny woman, often old. Specific characteristics always depend on a region, often wearing rags or clothes made from moss and grass. There are several theories of how Kikimoras were created. One of them was that they were created from souls of cursed children or miscarriage children. One of the alternatives was that they were created from the souls of female ancestors. She occupied houses that were cursed or that were built on a grave. She preferred living in a cellar or behind a stove. She is hostile especially to men, but in general she likes to cause trouble around the household. She would wake up sleeping babies, knock over pots, scream, rip out hairs from the heads of people leaving the household, and fur or feathers of the animals. Also, our fellow sewists and crafters wouldn't want one of those in their household, as Kikimoras were known to be tangling and ripping yarn. Contrary to that, she loved to spin thread, but the sound of her spindle was a bad sign and also very noisy. But there is one more interesting fact about the Kikimora. She is the first traditional explanation for sleep paralysis in Russian folklore. I mean, her name kind of speaks for itself, as Mora in most Slavic languages translates to something along the lines of nightmare. The thing is that there are other creatures with similar names, like for example Mora or Zmora, and I found it a bit hard to draw the line of what applies to which of those beings. It seems that in Eastern Slavic mythology, Kikimoras and Moras are pretty much the same thing, or at least very similar, and in the Western Slavic folklore, Kikimoras, Moras and Zmoras developed more differences between them. Either way, Kikimoras are thought to send nightmares, or sit on a sleeping person's chest, making it hard to breathe and causing said person to have a sleepy paralysis, as they couldn't move with the creature pinning them down to their bed. And the last monster I will be covering today is a Strzyga. In the Witcher series, a cursed princess, and in Slavic mythology, a female demon, predominantly found in Polish and Silesian folklore, somewhat similar to a vampire. The monster has the ability to turn into an owl and has owl characteristic itself, like beard-like claws. They can also have red eyes, a big head and wings. If you think this segment about the appearance of a Strzyga seems kind of forced, it is, because nobody actually talks about what it looks like according to mythology, and somewhat all the art I've seen is still pretty consistent. But what really are Strzygi? Well, the unlucky number was 2. People that were born with 2 hearts and the 2 souls that come with it were believed to be Strzygi. Strzygas, how do we even use this word in English? Anyway, there are many more reasons why someone could be deemed a Strzyga. Someone born with 2 sets of teeth could be one, as well as a baby born with already developed teeth. Lunatics could be also a Strzyga, but my 2 personal favorites are people without armpit hair and people with monobrows. These are odd ones. Oh, also on a more disturbing and realistic note, during epidemics, people that fell ill were sometimes buried alive, and those who managed to dig themselves out of their graves, often weak, ill, and with bloodied hands, were said to be Strzygi by others. Okay, but that means a Strzyga was essentially a human being. So how did they become the blood-sucking monsters that they are known as? Well, because they have two souls, when they die as people, they don't actually die fully. Their second soul remains alive. Oh, and that second soul really loves blood! After dying and being buried, Strzyga would reawaken and leave its grave to hunt. They sucked out blood and ate the insides of living creatures. Even though their main prey were people, they could also sustain themselves off of animals. The main reason for causing harm to people though was revenge. If you did any harm to a Strzyga during its life as a human, well, you're fucked. But Strzygi could also cause harm in other ways. Strzyga being spotted by its family was deemed as bad luck and an omen of death. Sometimes Strzygas would return to their family home at night and perform their everyday duties that they did when they were still alive. But for the family it meant bad sleep, weakened health, paleness and many more. But how to protect yourself against a Strzyga? Well, you can bury the person face down, bury the head separate from the body, burn the body, hammer nails and stakes into various parts of the Strzyga's body, put a flint into its mouth after exhumation, ring the church bells, slap it across the face with your left hand, bury it again outside the village and pin it down with a rock, scatter poppy seeds in the shape of a cross in every corner of the house, exhumate the body in the presence of a priest and bury it again after additional rituals, put small objects into the Strzyga's grave to make it count them. But the version from the Netflix series also appears in folk tales and legends. In Tales of Highlanders from Babia Góra appears a young dead countess that was a Strzyga. The way to defeat her was making a salt circle around her grave and lying down in the grave until the rooster crows 3 times, leaving the deceased woman outside her grave. My favorite way of defeating a Strzyga though comes from Podhale, where to get rid of the monster you had to catch it into the waistband of your underwear. You can imagine that this kind of way to defeat the monster wasn't very popular. As we are already on the funny stories, Strzygas from some regions were pretty unique in their wrongdoings. In Silesia, the male Strzygony could cut up clothes on a person just by looking, which could lead to pretty embarrassing situations. But Strzygi from Podhale could be even funnier. They could suck out the blood out of men's nipples and cause them to develop breasts. And on that note, thank you for watching! If you enjoyed this video, liking and subscribing makes a huge difference and it really helps me out a lot. Also, if you enjoyed this video, why not get notified when the new ones come out? I did have to describe all these monsters quite broadly, but if Slavic mythology is something that interests you and you would like to see videos breaking down those creatures in more detail, let me know down in the comments. Mam nadzieję, że spotkamy się w przyszłych filmikach i żegnam.